She's both an entrepreneur and industry expert and has established her own consulting firm and holding leadership positions at firms such as being a management consultant at a Center for Strategic Technology. She believes in the law of attraction. Now, if some of you aren't familiar with the law of attraction, it's basically the idea that our lives are a direct consequence of what we think about. So if you're thinking positively, you'll have positive experiences, where if you think negatively, then negative experiences will approach you more. She believes that we're responsible for what our world looks like. So please welcome to the stage Gail Chen as she shares with you the lessons we learned from people about living when they're facing death and how we can incorporate these insights into our lives. Thank you so much, Gail.
Thank you very much, Jen, for the introduction. It's great to be here at Imagine Talks for a second year. So much has happened in the past year. 2015 was in many ways a year of heartbreak. In the world, there were acts of violence at home and abroad. There was discrimination. The world is filled with so many tragedies and injustices. I often wish I knew the why behind so many of these things. So where do we get encouragement and strength from when faced with these challenges that can shatter us? How do you explain the unexplainable? I'd like to share with you personal stories of lives worth living and the lessons we learn from people about living when they're facing death. And through these learnings, how do we design our lives to create and live a meaningful life? 2015 was marked by the death of a classmate from cancer at the age of 37 and the loss of my grandmother at the age of 99. It was also a year of transformation for me where I learned to truly feel in the wake of these tragedies. And so my talk is structured like the progression of themes covered in books written by one of my favorite scholars, Brené Brown. From the power of vulnerability, daring greatly, and then rising strong. Last year, I prepared for this talk by going through a lot of research journals, and this year I started from reflecting within. In the past, I would have also introduced myself with a few titles and companies I worked for from my resume, or with these. How many of you have taken any of these self-assessments at school or at work? So on the left, we have StrengthsFinders. Here with StrengthsFinders, there was a whole movement by employers away from identifying weaknesses. The thinking behind that was that it takes much more time and effort for us to improve our weaknesses. Rather, the new school of employee developments really focused on identifying your top 5 strengths and continuing to capitalize on those. Or we also have Myers-Briggs, which is a personality assessment, and it helps you understand your psychological preferences and how you perceive the world and make decisions. There are even lists of ideal jobs and career paths here based on your Myers-Briggs type. Or on another tool, the Enneagram. This one is more about whether you're feeling with your heart more, do you relate with your gut, or are you in your head just thinking about how to get things done? We had these labels. Most of these times, we even posted them outside of our office doors. And according to this, I should be a CEO, which I am not and don't aspire to be. Or how about how often we talk about the degrees that we've attained or the schools that we've went to. I started off as an engineer, learning how to build things at Stanford, building things that don't fall apart. Then I attended business school part-time at Haas. I attended school on the weekends while working full-time. And here I learned how to make decisions, learning how to value things using tools like net present value, return on investment. And then at work, through continuous studies and certifications, I learned about design thinking and innovation. And so I'm really looking forward to a speaker later on this afternoon, Dennis Boyle. Still, these can often be our false identities. I know that I tend to fall back on these as ways to describe who I am. So I would like to introduce myself differently this year for you to get to know me by some personal events that touched me the most this past year. It was preparing my grandma's eulogy that I learned of the unfathomable hardships that she survived. She left rural China as a young girl to seek a better life in Korea, only to be uprooted again during the Korean War. She was on a small boat in rough waters fleeing Korea during the war, pregnant with my mother and with her 4 other small children. The passengers agreed to give her the only pole on the boat to hold on to with her children. She survived. Most others on the boat did not. And it was through the compassion of others who witnessed her vulnerability and acted that I am fortunate to be here today. One of my favorite New York Times columnists, David Brooks, talks of eulogy virtues versus resume virtues. The resume virtues are the skills that you bring to the marketplace. The eulogy virtues are the ones that are talked about at your funeral. Whether you were kind, brave, honest, or faithful, were you capable of deep love? Many of us are clearer on how to build an external career than on how to build inner character. What is your identity? When I think of my grandmother, I think of her strength, her love for her family and those in her community. For my generation, it is not easy to truly understand my grandma's sacrifice to survive the immigrant experience in not 1, but 3 countries. Through times of war and incredible change, all while helping others, taking care of a large family with unconditional love. But it is through understanding of her sacrifices that I feel compelled and empowered to dare greatly. My classmate at Stanford, Paul Kalanithi, was just finishing a decade of training to become a neurosurgeon when he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And like that, he went from being a doctor to a patient. On March 9th, 2015, Paul passed away from lung cancer, having just become a new father to a baby girl. Many thought that Paul could have been an English professor or a writer, which he had a talent and a passion for. At one point, he seemed headed down that path, and he thought he'd come back to it when he had more time. After he was diagnosed, he began to write. Now, time was the very thing that he had so little of. His insights on grappling with mortality and his changing perception of time were published in the New York Times essays, How Long Have I Got Left? And Before I Go, examining what time means in the context of illness. I worked in biotech for over a decade on cancer treatments, and I've heard many patient speakers. And it is love and empathy for those who suffer that draws many of us to this type of work. Paul captures it beautifully. What patients seek is not scientific knowledge that doctors hide, but existential authenticity that each must find on her own. These words repeated in his head, I can't go on, I'll go on. Paul had the courage to reveal himself in a book, When Breath Becomes Air. He passed away before the book was finished. His wife, Lucy, took it to publication. This book was released 2 weeks ago and is quickly becoming one of the bestsellers. This is a memoir from a dying doctor showing how profoundly influential words can be on influencing our lives. So, where drifters allow the world to write the story of their lives, when we dare greatly, we are committing to show up, which also means that we risk falling, but we also own our own story, and we create and own how the story ends. So I often get the question, why would you leave a company that year after year is voted one of the best places to work in the United States? How did I know it was time to move on, and why the change? My response is having the courage to let go of what people think and be at peace in waiting for the right thing. So I took the leap and I started my own consulting business, working with Stanford Medicine Next on a healthcare conference where I had the privilege of looking at healthcare from the perspective of patients and listening to patient speakers such as Dana Lewis that you'll hear later on today. I immersed myself in feeling. And I'd like to share with you insights from one of the most popular courses at Stanford. Surprisingly, it's not computer science. It's actually a course called Designing Your Life. And to be fair and balanced, I also looked at the most popular courses at Cal. There wasn't a single course, but it was also in the same realm of psychology, sociology, and cognitive science. The class asks you to create 3 radically different paths for our lives called Odyssey plans. This exercise helped me to rethink things that were so definite in my head for what I needed to accomplish. The path that I should take given my years of training. So the feelings of guilt, anxiety, pressure, and expectation when choosing a career, also influenced by women's leadership books like Lean In, these thoughts were transformed. And instead I thought about my core values that have been a driving force for change, and the feelings of gratitude, generosity, self-awareness, and adaptability. Studies show that less than 20% of people actually know their passion. Most of us need to be intentional about it, and so we find it by working into it. We can create a point of view and then test it, refining our Odyssey plans as our lives and our careers progress. We spent so much of our lives building up so much potential. Now is the time to dare greatly. Because when we spend our lives waiting until we're perfect or bulletproof before we walk into the arena, we ultimately sacrifice relationships and opportunities that may not be recoverable. We squander our precious time, and we turn our backs on gifts that are unique contributions that only we can make. It was during this last career change that I became involved with Edge interns and Imagine Talks. Last year I met our last speaker, Faye, here at Imagine Talks, and we're now working together. Faye cares deeply about people and is committed to goodness. She's a true successful global leader, and I continue to learn from her every day, and I'm incredibly grateful to do so. Understanding these core values and finding those who are willing to walk with us on this journey enables us to rise strong. And having a support network to ask for and receive help, it helps us to focus on things that are most important in our lives, on the people who are there for us in the toughest moments, who have changed or influenced our lives. I see the leaders here, Francis, Rose, Vincent, and many others, committed to empowering others. We share our stories of struggle because we're most alive when we connect with others. Connections is why we're here. It's what gives us purpose and meaning to our lives. And finding that place that Frederick Buechner describes as where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. I don't think about balance, I think about intersections and connections of all these facets of our lives. There are so many connections that I can draw where I am today. It just makes so much sense. At work, I focus on delighting the customer, and at home, I'm delighting in my family. At work, I love looking at the latest technologies and seeing how we can use them to improve lives and extend wellness and safety. From drones to the latest in virtual reality to sensors and applications to change nutritional behavior and fitness. My 7-year-old son, Adam, is here today, and one of the lessons that I learned from parenting that I also apply to my approach to challenges is, wow, that really hurt, but it's so important that I am going in again. And seeing how much is going on in the world today, we are choosing to engage and have our voices heard. Paul's essay had words also for his infant daughter, but I'd like to dedicate this to all of those who have walked along with us on this journey. When you come to one of the many moments in life when you must give an account of yourself, Provide a ledger of what you have been and done and meant to the world. Do not, I pray, discount that you filled a dying man's days with a sated joy, a joy unknown to me in all my prior years, a joy that does not hunger for more and more, but rests satisfied. What I leave you with is this: we don't have to do it all alone. We were never meant to. I want to hear your stories. It illuminates what really matters. How are you designing your lives? Thank you.